evening. It's wonderful to see such a great crowd here this evening. Thank you all for coming. I'm Sarah Pritchard. I'm the Dean of Libraries and Charles Deering McCormick, University Librarian. On behalf of the library and the Library Board of Governors and the University Archives, we'd like to welcome you all to Deering Meadow and thank you for joining us as we take a little trip back in history this evening. There are several people I'd like to especially welcome. That's why I'm carrying around the list in my hand. We have a couple of our university trustees here this evening. Debbie Brady, Rich Dean, who I saw right over here, thank you. And Gordon Siegel. Gordon Siegel, who we're proud to feature as one of our guest speakers this evening. In addition to Gordon, we have several members of the library's Board of Governors in attendance. Gordon himself has been a longtime member of our board. In addition, we have Bob Avery, Fred Brown, Byron Gregory. I'll just let them all wave. Peter Hong, Jim Caddick, Dee McKechnie, Sandy Riggs, and Judith Paine McBrien, who will be moderating our panel this evening. I'd especially like to honor my boss, the provost, Dan Linzer, here in the front, who has been very, very supportive of the library throughout his time as the provost, and we really greatly appreciate that commitment. Even when the university was going through really quite difficult financial times, as we all did a few years ago, Dan was committed to making sure that the research resources were sustained. I'd like to give special recognition to Steve Strawn, who is sitting here in the front row. Steve is the chairman of the Library Board of Governors, and Dan Jones, who is also in the front on the Board of Governors and a university trustee, and Dan's wife, Susan Jones. Together, Steve and Dan and Susan are chairing the library's committee for the We Will campaign for Northwestern. So if the library is the heart of the university, and I think we are physically and intellectually here, then these folks are its lifeblood. Steve and Dan and Susan, we are very deeply grateful for your efforts in helping lead us forward. I'd like to welcome special guest Liz Carr. Liz, who I saw a little sitting way back. Liz is the niece of architect Walter Netsch, who designed University Library in behind Deering, and the Rebecca Crown Center and a few other buildings here on campus. Liz's father, Bill Kerr, was Northwestern's vice president and business manager from 1953 to 1981, which, as you'll soon hear, was a critical time in the development of the campus. It's an honor to host you here, just in front of the steps of Deering Library, one of the defining symbols of the Northwestern campus. And especially to welcome Steve Strawn, who is a direct descendant of Charles Deering, and Steve's son Cameron, who is actually the first member ever of the Deering family since 1850, whenever the university was founded, to be an undergraduate at Northwestern University. Finally. But Deering Library is not the only symbol or the only facet of our campus history that has transformed what it means to attend Northwestern. This university has quite a colorful history behind its growth, and now it is just 50 years since the completion of the lake fill. And this is something that students and faculty even now take for granted, and yet probably many of you were here before it was here and remember its occurrence. So we're going to pause this evening to take a look at the history of the relationship between the campus and the lake, sort of before, during, and into the future. What is the vision for the campus? It's important to note this journey is never complete. We are in a major phase of growth at this very moment. Recently, the class of 2018 marched through the arch to took its place on campus. Wonderful photos, again, taken here on Deering Meadow. When these students arrived, the cranes were filling the sky. There's probably a few more cranes out there even as we speak. Cranes are still going to be in the sky 4 years from now when this year's students graduate. And we hope there may be more cranes, particularly for the renovation of Deering Library. Tonight, our expert panel will address not only how Northwestern has expanded over time, but what it took. How did we get there? As you might expect, not everything in the history of Northwestern has gone as smoothly as the surface of the lagoon. If you do any social media tweeting or tagging this evening, if you use one of the tags that's mentioned over here on the sign, we'll be doing a raffle at the end of the evening with some souvenirs based on who are the people who post tweets. So that means to our speakers, if you're going to say anything unusually candid, you may need to warn the audience not to tweet. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. Again, my thanks to all of you for coming. I'd like to turn and introduce the man who knows more about Northwestern than anybody, University Archivist Kevin Leonard.
Well, thank you very much, Sarah, and thank all of you for coming here tonight. There's something that Sarah doesn't know about me that she could have told you, and that's in the fall of 1973. I was a 17-year-old freshman arriving at Northwestern, full of the important questions that youth will pose about life. What is the meaning of life? What are facts? What is truth? What is virtue? Do you believe that? No. Now the question is, what's beer? Where do you get it? Who are the easiest graders? And will I really ever have to use the library? So here I am at this citadel of learning, and don't know where to turn with these questions. And of course, I go to the person that a freshman calls on most often, and that would be a sophomore. And I learned beer was good, Falstaff was reasonable. I got a reasonably priced. I could get as much of it as I wanted if I joined a fraternity, so check, got all that stuff done. Got the names of, thank God, some teachers who took great pity on me and never wished to expose or deal with the Stygian gloom of my ignorance, and passed me through Northwestern so I can stand in front of you tonight. As for the library, when I asked the question to my sophomore friend, will I really need to go to the library? The answer wasn't yes or no, it was, dude, the library is like sinking. It's like, huh? This is a legend of the time. And remember, this is the backwash of the 1960s and early 1970s, where there's a lot of anti-authoritarian sentiment and put your thumb in the eye of the older people, never trust anyone over 30, etc. A digression, since I've gotten gray hair and raised 3 kids, I've now learned that you trust no one under 30. But the story at the time was that the library was sinking. Northwestern had this grand building program, that they hired a top-notch architectural firm and a great architect to work on this glorious new building, and it is. But for all the erudition and the intelligence and architectural smarts, they didn't calculate in the weight of the books, and therefore when people put the books in the library, which is situated on landfill, it began to sink slowly into the lake, and I have it on good authority, 1 or 2 inches a year. So, I did go into the library, and I went right into the basement, and I looked. I was expecting to find a swimming pool or something like that. And it was bone dry. I said, okay. I then used the library as a resource and was pointed in the direction of the University Archives. I asked, what's this deal about the library sinking? And the person running the archives at the time said, what are you, some kind of an idiot? I said, well, I am a 17-year-old freshman. And he said, no, the library's not sinking, and provided all sorts of resources to me to answer the question of the moment. Architectural drawings, newspaper clippings, university records, etc. And I could see for myself. And then learned a bit later from a faculty member of the time that sinking libraries, sinking buildings, and structures, the whole structure of authority at a university is something that's always called into question by the youth. And this is just a common trope of youth to poke fun at the elders. So what I did learn from that is that there is truth, and there are facts, and there are values and wonderful things to be found in the library. So I want to thank you all for coming to this library event, and I hope we can entertain you, but also inform you and give you some kind of appreciation for the facts of Northwestern's history. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Judith Mcbrian. Judith holds a master's degree in architectural history from Columbia University and an MBA from the Yale School of Management. Judith, you're killing me tonight. Can't we get a Northwestern degree to help out? She is president of Perspectives Media, director and producer of the Archimedia Workshop, and the director of the Daniel Burnham Film Project. For over 15 years, she has written, directed, and produced programs about architecture, history, and urban design for public television. And she produced the award-winning 5-part series Skyline Chicago for public television, a show about Chicago's history, development, and urban design. She is the director of the documentary film Make No Little Plans, Daniel Burnham and the American City, as well as the author of several books about architecture. In 2013, Judith received the Society of Architectural Historians Award for Excellence in Architectural Media. She will be honored for her work next week by the Chicago Public Library Foundation. And best of all, she has served as a member of Northwestern's Library Board of Governors since 2004. Judith?
Well, thank you. Kevin, that's a hard act to follow. Thank you very much. As you know, Kevin knows more about Northwestern history than anyone else on campus, and he's been the archivist now for 30 years, so we're really delighted that he's here. And I know I'm preaching to the converted, and Sarah already mentioned this, but I just want to say the library really is the heart of the university. I mean, it touches every department, it touches every student, even the coaches who are looking at video games, those are going to wind up in the archives. So it's really, really important to support the library. And I want to dispel a notion that some people may still have, and that is with the great growth in technology, the libraries aren't as essential as they used to be. But they are busier than ever. The demands of the library is greater than ever. The libraries themselves are busier with students and using the library in so many different ways. So it's just a very exciting time to be part of the library, and that's why I'm honored to be on the Library Board of Governors and to work with Sarah Pritchard, who is such a dynamic and thoughtful leader and also has a wicked sense of humor. So with that background, we are here tonight to discuss one of the most dramatic events in the history of the university, that is the lake effect, the expansion of the campus into Lake Michigan. It was bold, it was visionary, it's probably illegal or certainly extremely difficult to do today, and it was transformative for the university in ways that we're still seeing today. So we hope that you enjoy this evening that we've planned for you tonight. And before I introduce our other two distinguished panelists, I just want to mention two things, just to kind of put this in perspective, to give you a sense of scale. First, the lakefront fill for the university doubled the size of the campus, more than 80 acres, and it was done in 2 years. And this doubling of the size of the campus, the footprint of the campus, was done adjacent to the historic campus, so it could integrate into a sense of place for this great university. It wasn't in another part of town, it wasn't in another city, it wasn't in another country, that's another story. So I think it's really, really important. But beyond the actual land itself, what matters is that it provided a way for the university to re-envision its mission in terms of new structures, new amenities, new services that would attract faculty from around the world to come to Northwestern. And we are still seeing the effects of that today, and we will continue to do so. So, without further ado, with that background, you've already met Kevin, and I'd like to briefly introduce our other two distinguished panelists. With me tonight are two others who are standing on the shoulders of those who made the decision 50 years ago this month for the Lakefront Fill. So we're really lucky to have them here tonight to tell us about the challenges and the triumphs of the 21st century Northwestern campus. Gordon Siegel went to Northwestern. He met his wife at Northwestern. He's been on the Board of Trustees since 1994, and he's a member of the Board of Governors of the library. You may know him as the founder of Crate and Barrel, and we're really delighted to have him here because he has such a keen sense of design and history for the university, commitment to the university. So there's no one better here to tell you about the growth and the vision of the campus. And next to him is Eugene Sunshine. Many of you know Gene. He served as Senior Vice President for Business and Finance for the university for almost 20 years, 17 years. Now, Gene is the person responsible for implementing the vision of the trustees. He's the one who's dealing with the community, with the press, with the budgets, with the contracts, with the execution. Now, Gene, I'm looking forward to hearing some of the stories that you have to tell us tonight. So just a word about the format for tonight. We'll hear from all our panelists. I'm encouraging them to ask questions among each other. We have a few questions for him too, and then we'll open it up to the audience so you'll have a chance to ask all of us your questions and be engaged with us tonight. So thank you very much. And we're going to begin tonight with Kevin Leonard, and he's going to be able to put all of our discussion into an historical context for us.
Thank you, Judith. So my job is to tell you the history of Northwestern, if the slide projector works. If not, we'll do this with my hands. All right, looks like we're getting some resolution. In a few seconds, I think you'll be seeing the visage of Clark Hinman. Clark Hinman was Northwestern's first president. Northwestern was established in 1850, but didn't acquire its campus until 1853. Reverend Hinman, appointed the university's first president, spoke with the initial founders and gave them a key advice. Those founders had acquired some property in the city of Chicago, the rapidly growing city of Chicago. And Hinman, being a pious Methodist minister, said, get out of Dodge. You don't want to locate your school in the city for a couple reasons. One, cities were noted among the more pious to be centers of vice and debauchery and depravity. You and I know that depravity knows no geography, and it kind of exists, in the human soul. But enough about me. Clark Hinman told these guys, get out of the city. It's not a good place for the education of young men. Northwestern was all male at the beginning. And also go somewhere outside the bounds of the city, close but not so close, where you can acquire a large amount of property for a more reasonable price. That brings us to this man, Orrington Lunt, who was one of the founders of Northwestern. Mr. Lunt, in 1853, came up this way with a friend to transact some business. Mr. Lunt was in the area that we consider to be by the arch, the oak grove by the arch. He stepped down from the carriage in which he was riding. He looked at the trees, a beautiful grove of oak trees. He could see in the distance the shimmering waves of the lake, and he thought, this is a darn good piece of property. And before my fellow founders meet and determine a final location for the university, I need to get them up here and see this place. And he did. And by legend, they came to what we now know as the Northwestern campus. They saw the oak grove, they saw the land. They threw their hats into the air, cried Eureka, and established that this would be the place for their school. What made this particularly convenient was, okay, it followed the advice of Reverend Hinman. It was a little bit out of the dodgier parts of the city. Land was cheaper, but land could be acquired pretty readily. They found a parcel of about 380 acres that was all one piece, so it was a simple matter for them to buy the land. They bought far more land than they needed. This is a plat of early Evanston. It's an 1854 plat. Northwestern bought all this land and reserved this section in the top right corner for its campus. The rest of it was subdivided and leased and sold to raise revenues to establish the university. So when Northwestern was getting its feet underneath it, it was an educational institution, but it was also a real estate enterprise. What did the place look like in its early years? Well, we don't have photographic evidence of the real early years, but in the 1870s, this is a shot taken from the belfry of University Hall, looking north along the lake. So it's a an area sparsely populated with buildings. Fairly rustic. The groves of oak trees here and there on campus were the most significant feature, most often remarked upon by students, faculty, and such. Okay, what about the lake? The lake did not figure too much in the planning. It was a source of water, it was attractive, but Northwestern did not see the lake as a critical feature of its campus in terms of siting its buildings or orienting its buildings. The lake was a commercial area. It was a zone of traffic for shipping of the time. It was a public utility. It's where you've got your drinking water, and it's where the effluent wastewater would go when, well, you know when. The architectural specifications for University Hall, when talking about constructing the toilets, also talk about running a pipe from those toilets down toward the lake. So the lake, the lake is a utility. It's a feature of the landscape, but it's not the type of feature that we see today as overwhelmingly attractive, recreational, and a place where we ought to site our buildings to take advantage of the wonderful views. The lake was a place of danger. In 1860, the Lady Elgin, a passenger boat from Milwaukee, traveling between Milwaukee and Chicago, collided with a schooner with tremendous loss of life. Northwestern students and Garrett Biblical Institute students rushed to the scene of the accident a few miles north of here and made heroic efforts to rescue people, rescue those that they could from that disaster. A result of which was the establishment of a life-saving station on the Evanston campus. By the 1870s, this is a Northwestern student crew. Northwestern students, Garrett students, would staff these life-saving boats that were stationed at the south end of the campus and apply the waters of the lake in times of danger. And by the mid-1870s, the federal government had established a life-saving station on the shore of Lake Michigan at the southern end of the Northwestern campus. And this would be, again, staffed with student crews. And for decades, Northwestern students worked the lake in heroic fashion. This is a view of the campus from the 1880s, and it is not entirely realistic. So Northwestern, as a small denominational institution, grew hand in mouth as its enrollment expanded and as university officers could afford, which meant that it grew very, very gradually, very slowly. This is an ambitious plan dating from the 1880s of what the campus could look like. And you can see, if those of you familiar with the work of Frederick Law Olmsted, in an informal arrangement of existing buildings with axial arrangements of more formal structure on the middle. This never happened. University Hall, Fairweather Hall, Old College Building, those were Northwestern's campus buildings. So this is a pipe dream. and it never got any traction. A few years later, campus map from the turn of the century, and you can see the actual campus is much more modest than what architects were dreaming about. And one thing to keep in mind is that with this big piece of property and with an educational institution that's going to be here for presumably for a long length of time, many architects over the decades have come up with very creative views of what they, of how they saw the campus, how they could improve the campus. But this is more a realistic view. And you can see from this that Northwestern buildings are oriented to, practically, to the roadbed of the time, not to take advantage of the lakeshore. And there are reasons for that. We'll get to that in a minute, those for a minute. Here's a very interesting shot, aerial view from 1907. Who was flying over here in 1907? This was taken, a photographer who used a system he developed of kites to hold his camera aloft. And as you can, there we go. So Fisk Hall, Fairweather Hall, approximately the site of Kresge, University Hall would be the landmarks that are recognizable to people familiar with Northwestern. But look how close Fisk Hall is to the shoreline. This building, Heck Hall in the middle, is approximately the site of today's Deering Library. Look how close it is to the shoreline. But in between the buildings and the shoreline is another grove. So this is more or less a recreational area for the students. When you look at scrapbooks and diaries and journals and newspaper accounts from about this time, you find many a mention of Northwestern and its shady trees. Seldom does the lake figure in the creative imagination of the students from that time. A little bit more inland, I just like this picture. It's a cow on approximately where we are now, more of a bucolic setting for Northwestern, but you can sense that it's a small-scale practical institution where we're keeping account. Orrington Lunt Library in the background, so if you know Lunt Building over here, you can orient yourself. And here is a shot from, ignore that 87, that's not the year, early 20th century shot, presumably of Northwestern students from the campus walk. So did not figure in the placement of buildings, the lakeshore did not. It was a natural feature, but again, the trees were the big deal here at the time. Here's a color postcard from approximately the same period. So you can see how the walkways were arranged to take advantage of the lakeshore, but also going through the wooded area. This is much later photograph, but this is what I could find, the back view, what the place looked like from the lake. And take a note here of how narrow the sandy beach is, but also the rise above the beach. So a bluff, seafront property, short beach, and a gradual rise to the campus buildings. Recreational use of the lake really doesn't get going until the late 1800s, and the earliest mention I could find of recreational use of the lake in this area was also a tragedy. It was a drowning of a Northwestern high school student. Northwestern operated its own high school for a year, who went into the lake a little too late in the season and had an adverse reaction to the very cold water and could not be resuscitated. But why so little use of the lake? Well, Northwestern has traditionally been a school that with a late start time. So if you're interested in swimming, this is probably not the best place to do it when you show up about October. But for those who were here in the springtime or the summer months, it could be a place of great charm. A little bit later, some Northwestern students from the late 1930s on the beach, but again, you can see from this illustration that the beach itself is a pretty narrow band. You can tell that by what's washed up from the high water mark, and then the short distance between there and the bluff, and then over here, you can see the stairs leading up the bluff. Those of you who know Deering Library and the University Library, Northwestern operated its own beach. This is Foster Street Beach, so right behind Deering was a public bathing beach, and that's probably where this was taken. A little bit further south, down at Fisk Hall, you get a sense of what's going on with the shoreline. And again, a bluff, limited opportunities for use of the beach the way we know it today. to the extent that students would take advantage of the piers at the time for their sunbathing or for jumping off, cooling off in the water. Okay, I just like that picture. But behind the individuals, you can see one of the piers constructed in fairly modern times, a concrete structure that allowed passage of some of the water. Lake Michigan can be a pretty tempestuous body of water. And Northwestern's property often damaged the construction of piers and breakwaters for salvaging the bluff and retaining land here, something that vexed university administrators from the earliest days. In fact, the oak groves closest to the lake, the trees were often cut down to form piers and breakwaters in the early decades of the university's history. Going from here to campus planning and issues with the lake. This is a plan from the 1890s. We don't know who drew it up exactly. And it shows the campus with a seawall erected to protect Northwestern's pretty fragile shoreline. So at the right end of the picture here is the campus that's fairly familiar to us now, University Hall, Peck Hall, or Deering Library. There's the Lunt Library building, Memorial Hall, and a lagoon protected by a seawall. This is kind of neat because this part of the area was going to be reserved for sculling and other recreational athletic endeavors involving the water. This area was reserved for an athletic field, football field, baseball field, and over here, that says polo field. Don't you just hate it when people talk about Northwestern as a country club school? That was going to be the polo field with a public access on this road. You can turn around here. And this short road that leads to the lagoon obviously anticipates Al Capone and the need to dump bodies pretty conveniently into a body of water. This, of course, this plan never went anywhere. Daniel Burnham did some sketches on behalf of the university in the early years of the 20th century. And the lakefront will be down at the bottom of the view here. You can see the piers jutting out. A little bit of a modification of the lakefront to include this design, which looks to me for all the world like a crop circle. But you can see Northwestern's extant buildings down here, and then with this pretty formal plan of roadways, how Burnham saw treating it in a more classical fashion. Another one of Burnham's structures shows axial arrangement of the roadbed, kind of a Pierre L'Enfant look to it, preserving Northwestern's extant buildings, but also creating more formal groupings. This one opening onto the view of the lake. So if this looks like Grant Harbor to you, the Burnham plan for Chicago, and what we see in Grant Harbor, I don't think you'd be too far off. Residential structures, smaller residential structures created to the north. More elaborate treatment also by Burnham, with a botanical garden in the middle, and tree plantings along this boulevard. Again, the lakefront looking pretty similar to what it was at the time. And then finally, a really grand plan that was submitted that shows Northwestern with its extant buildings completely obliterated. And now we're getting to look like a major city, and very familiar with Burnham plans. Tremendous amount of planting here. He probably had some stock in a nursery, given the number of trees. And out here, we see actually work done to protect the shoreline. The piers are gone because this roadbed, Lakeshore Drive, is shielding the Northwestern campus with a watercourse in the middle. Well, these were impressionistic sketches, never of course occurred. A few years later, a campus competition for architectural design decided in 1911. A number of very prominent architects worked on sketches for how to improve Northwestern. sometimes incorporating existing buildings, University Hall, say, Northwestern's signature tower down here, but then going far afield with projected structures. And you can see here, do they take advantage of the lakefront? Well, they're close to the lakefront, but they're also sited on the roadbed and not more of a naturalistic type of siting of these buildings. Incredible one here in there. But you get a sense of Northwestern's layout and what architects in the early 20th century were able to do with that. The winning plan was submitted by a New York firm, Palmer and Hornbostel. Includes University Hall, you can see it in profile here, but much new construction. So the campus as known then was largely obliterated, preserving University Hall, the arc of what we know as Deering Meadow, the gymnasium, and then residential structures up north. Palmer and Hornbostel actually did execute the residential structures on the North Campus, but not according to their grandest design. So those of you who may have lived or traversed the area up north will recognize their work. In the 1920s, Northwestern appointed James Gamble Rogers as university architect, and Rogers came up, he's the man who designed Deering Library, and here it is, but also looked to the future and put these other structures very much in the Rogers Gothic style, marching up along the university campus. So very little of his plan was executed, Deering being the notable exception to that. And then something else from the 1930s. Well, we're in the Depression now, so this is a fanciful design that sees the campus Sheridan Road here. You've got the familiar roadbed, but with an enormous campus built into the lake. So you can see from these early plans that use of the lake and filling of the lake have been on people's minds from at least the late 19th century. Here's a aerial shot from the 1930s, and from it, looking south, you get a sense of how crowded Northwestern is getting. The Palmer and Hornbostel buildings on the north end of the campus, gymnasium and a recreational field, and then the groves and the university buildings. Here's Deering Meadow in there. By World War II, especially by the end of World War II, the campus was decidedly crowded with people coming back from the GI Bill. Northwestern's enrollment swelled to its largest ever size during the immediate post-war years, and temporary structures were erected in various locations on campus, basically wherever there was some free land. This is an idealized view of what the Quonset huts, surplus Quonset huts, would look like on Deering Meadow. They were located on Deering Meadow. A more realistic view is this one here. So not terribly attractive, but they served their purpose for a number of years. During the immediate post-war years, Northwestern's ambitions became quite grand. University administrators queried faculty and asked questions like, what do we need to do to move this institution forward, to make it a truly great national or international institution? And those of you who are university administrators here know the answer always comes back, I need a new building. We'll get to that. Here is a shot, aerial shot, that shows the lakeshore, the bluff by Swift Hall of Engineering, and you can see from this the damage and the erosion to the Northwestern lakeshore and to the bluff along the lake, and just how close some of the university buildings were to this area. So again, a vexing problem for the university. In the 1950s, Operation Sandbasket, students employed to help save the bluff. So piecemeal efforts to retain Northwestern's shoreline through sandbags, through the creation of breakwaters and piers, from almost from the inception of the university up until the construction of the lake fill. I'll skip that. Here is an aerial view of campus from the south. And again, those of you who may be unfamiliar with Northwestern prior to the lake fill, you can see the original shoreline, and when we look at some pictures in a minute, you'll see how dramatically the campus was changed by the construction of the university lake fill. One thing, take a look at this corner of the university by Fisk Hall. This area by the lake was the area where Northwestern put a lot of its junk buildings. All right, so the incinerator was down here, some of the buildings, buildings and ground type operations, and of course, what is also down at this area is the parking lot. Some things haven't changed all that much. Okay, from the 1950s, university top administrators started confronting the problem of a campus that needed to expand dramatically to fulfill the ambitions of the university. And university retained Skidmore, Owings, and Merrill, whose principal architect at the time, Walter Netsch, did a tremendous amount of work for Northwestern. And you can get an early sense of what they're looking at. They're turning away from piecemeal efforts, rejected the idea of more dense packing of buildings on the land. They didn't want what they were calling a concrete campus. It was very difficult to move inland into the residential areas because there's a price to pay for these nice residential properties in terms of money and also in terms of goodwill of townspeople, because every time you acquire that piece of residential property, Northwestern will be taking it off the tax rolls, and that's a painful political issue. But here is the lake fill somewhat as we know it. Northwestern bought several hundred acres, 125 acres, correct me if I've misspoken, of seabed from the state of Illinois, built on a portion of it. And this was Netsch's design for the lake fill. So it has that familiar bow curve there, but what's missing here is, of course, the lagoon. A subsequent design shows the lagoon, but note this corner down here. The lake fill actually was expanded into this southern sector. So by the very early 60s, a plan is in place, this dates from 61, to construct a lake fill according to the plan that, in the way that it actually happened. Also, note that the construction, or proposed construction for the lake fill, was zoned. This is something that's not new, dates back to the 19th century when Northwestern acquired the Evanston College for Ladies and its physical plant, its students. The music administration building was the Evanston College for Ladies. So when Northwestern acquired that, it became coeducational in 1869 and folded the Evanston College for Ladies into the university in the 1870s. It brought with it new students, but also a new curriculum. And the curricular features of college life for women at that time centered on the arts, the humanities, the fine and performing arts. And that's where those have been at Northwestern ever since. The male-centric curriculum, once it evolved away from the classics, went into engineering and sciences. When Northwestern got in the business finally of providing housing for its male students by about the time of World War I, the university located that housing up at the north portion of the campus as far away as possible from the female housing for practical reasons. But the curricular features of the male-centric curriculum, were located at the north end of campus, and that history is recognized in this Netsch plan for zoning of buildings. Here we have Rocky Miller, Northwestern's beloved president, on the left, Wesley Dixon, prominent trustee, with Illinois Governor Otto Kerner. I won't take up too much of your time after this, but those of you, talk to me about Otto Kerner, because in 1964 I was his grade school campaign manager, and I have a very interesting story to tell you about that, but I won't do it now. Otto Kerner was a Northwestern alumnus, and I'm not saying that caused him to execute the bills that had passed the Illinois House and the Illinois Senate that granted Northwestern the opportunity to buy land and to construct its lake fill. But this signing the deed, and Northwestern is in business, and very shortly thereafter bringing up barges of stone and sand to establish a seawall on the campus and to fill in this lake. So early photograph of lake fill construction, probably 1962. A little more development of the lake fill, even more development of the lake fill, and then, oops, finally, there we go, excuse me. Finally, this view here. So the about 74 acres of land added here in this sector, another 10 acres added later in the 1960s to the south. And you can see the familiar buildings, Deering, University Library. So many of the structures that you're used to now at Northwestern are actually out on fill. This is Rocky Miller's Douglas MacArthur moment, inspecting construction of the lake fill. He did return. Liz Kerr, where are you? There we go. Bill Kerr here with Rocky in the boat. Bill Kerr was the Northwestern person who did the heavy lifting on the lake fill, lobbying in Springfield to ensure that the university could realize its ambitions. And then finally in 1964, the lake fill was dedicated with a grand ceremony that attracted about 4,000 people. The speakers were gathered together on the roof of Vogelbach Computing Center, which no longer exists, and the speakers included Adlai Stevenson. Those of you of sufficient age will remember Adlai Stevenson as the Illinois politician, presidential candidate, ambassador to the United Nations from the United States. Stevenson was known for his wit, was a polished public speaker, and Northwestern alumnus, so he came in, did his duty for the university, and gave the dedicatory address at the dedication of the lake fill. Now, you can't really tell from this picture, maybe from Rocky Miller's grimace, it was a very windy day. And if you look at Adlai Stevenson's hand, he has a badly injured finger. So the combination of a bad hand and a windy day, his text blew away. And Stevenson said, lucky for you, and cut short his remarks. So with that, I am going to cut short my own remarks in the spirit of Governor Stevenson. And thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Kevin. That was fantastic. I have a few questions to ask about the lake fill as we move forward later on. But here we have Gordon Siegel, who can tell us what happened next.
I'm Gordon Siegel, and I was a member of the Board of Trustees since 1994. And during that tenure, after I was there for about 3 or 4 years, this was the tenure when Howard Treenans was chairman of the board. And he asked me one day if I would chair the Properties Committee. And the Properties Committee truly was a committee of the trustees who oversaw the construction and the planning and the development of the university and the architecture of the university and the buildings of the university. So loving architecture like I did and having built many buildings in our business, I thought, boy, that would really be a fun challenge and obviously could have some lasting impact on the university. At that time, I remember after my first meeting, Arnie Weber was our president, and Arnie came up to me and he said, Gordon, I just want you to remember, this university has been doubling its square footage every 10 years, and we have the same student population. So he really was a very conservative and thoughtful president, which we needed at the time he was here. But the point was, you know, why do we need all these buildings? And we keep expanding facilities. And in a sense, in his attempt to be very conservative, he always was, you know, truly watching every development that we could do. But then, of course, he retired, and Henry Beanans came along, and in a sense, we were able to get started. So I wanted to go back and follow up what you just heard and saw. We decided to take a series of photographs that we've had in our archives. I worked with Ron Naylor, who heads up this administration, part of the administration that deals with our buildings and properties, and tend to look back at the, right there, the second button, yeah. Tend to look back at what the university looked like before 1962. My wife and I went to university here from 1956 to 1960. So when we started looking at this, I was very surprised in rethinking where I went to school. And in a sense, what was it really like? Here's Sheridan Road, and the university was all in there. And there we have Harris Hall. I remember going there. University Hall, I remember going there. Here's the Deering Library, which seemed very big to me at that time. And over here is Fisk, and this must be Kresge, right? Kresge. And then, of course, down here you see the big engineering school. And, of course, all this was the men dorms. You had Pat and Jim right over here. Our campus ended over here. All this belonged to City of Evanston. This is the water filtration plant for the City of Evanston. And, of course, we had some dorms and some buildings that came down through here and through this area here. But you can see the Crown Center isn't built yet. Nothing much has been developed at the university campus. So this was in 1962. Then in 1964, as Kevin just said, we started putting in the landfill. And as you see, in 1964, we added, in this decade, 64 to 74, we added Norris Hall there. We added the expansion of Deering Library, which is, of course, here. We created Anderson Hall for Kellogg, which is over here. We added this new dormitory that was here, and then we added down here the Crown Center, the administration buildings that was done in that area. At that time, we created an observatory, what was it called, the Lock Observatory out on the point, and over here was the first, this wasn't the athletic center, what was this? Was that Roger Cyrill? Sorry. Right, and then you can see a lot of the, this is Vogelbach or the new computer system. This is before the Allen Center went in here. So everything you will see in red was done in the period of 1964 and 74. If you took the next decade, what happened is they built this big two-story concrete parking deck in the best location in the campus. They took that and made it a parking lot. That made a lot of sense. And as you'll see, that's what we're now dismantling with time. We ended up building the theaters, the Lewis Theater and the theater area. We created Pick Steiger, and over here is the Regenstein Music School. We created more dorms here, and I believe here. And then all the buildings in pink I showed you were in the prior decade. And over here was one of our first science buildings here that we built. And that was in that period, 75 to 84. Now from 85 to 94, we added to the music campus. By then, as you can see, we already had Norris, and we already had the library here. Now this is the original Deering that I thought was large when I came here. Obviously wasn't. We already now started expanding and building the Allen Center that goes here. We started building more to our science campus that was here. This is the new, when I first took over, this is just finishing. This is the education building. And then over here you see the Crown Sports and Athletic Complex. Again, we added an office building here. We didn't build that though. What was that? What's that? We bought a building that was added to our campus. And then this again was some housing that we added. If you go to the next decade, what you'll see here is now this is the Block Museum we added here. That's the Tribune building that was added for the School of Journalism. This was an extension of Kresge, I believe. This here was now the additional science buildings. I think these were the Pankow science buildings. And this was the Ryan building on nanotechnology. And then over here we added 2 dorms. One is Slivka and the other is, I don't remember the other name there. And down here we built Treenan's Hall down on Central Street, and we added to the front of let's say the north side of the stadium, of Dyke Stadium. So this little square is really over on Central Street, not on the campus. So now, this was 10 years ago, and if you look at all the buildings in red and pink, you can see we more than probably tripled the number of buildings that were on the campus by that time. And so now the committee is starting to get very concerned about, will we have enough space to grow the university? Where do we keep going? How do we grow it? What do we do? And in a sense, we started making and ended up making a master plan, which I will take you to in a minute. But let's first go to the 205-214 campus. So one, if you've come in from the south tonight, you'll see right off, this is Sheridan Road coming around the campus. You came in and we built a brand new parking deck, but in that parking deck we built a brand new visitor center. Our visitor center was in an old residential house about there, hard to find, very small, very uninviting. And we came up with the idea of making this a very glassy building. It wasn't going to look like a parking deck, and we created a very beautiful visitor center, which is what there, and the office for parking permits, et cetera, went there. We built a brand new sailing house. We had an old shabby one in that corner, and you'll see why we're taking it out, because we wanted to create a new green here. We just are finishing now the music and communication building, which we'll show you pictures of in a minute. We expanded a dorm facility here. We added to, was this our central water system? I think we added that here. This was our heating regeneration plant here. And then we finished Silverman Hall. So all of a sudden, this gigantic complex, and we had infills at the engineering school, every place where we had an opening. It was originally like just a bunch of crosses. We took these infills and filled them in for additional space for engineering. But this was Silverman Hall, which really linked together the whole science complex as one place almost. And then the Allen Center goes here. We created a lacrosse and soccer fields in here. And then right now, we've just finished the north parking garage, which in its lower levels will have not only additional classes for, or clinics for speech school, but it will also have our Innovation 1871. We're creating up an 1871-like place, which will be a 11,000-foot hall for innovation, for students to gather together, be able to work on their computers, form little companies, create ideas, and it'll be open to everybody with no charge or some slight charge to be able to locate and build their ideas in a really place with all the technology and all the help and all the space they need to get together and work together. So the next slide will bring you up to where and how this all evolved was a master plan, which was really done now about 12 or 14 years ago. And we followed it for the most part. The key thing with the master plan was to create an arch of green from the around the lagoons like that. And then obviously everything that was in black was already basically there. And they were suggesting this, the architectural firm doing is everything that was orange was where they felt we could add on over time. We didn't follow it completely, but we tried to keep it moving along. So now I'll show you some of the developments we did. In 2005, we built this Ford building. This is from looking at it from the east. And you drive by it, it's just literally to the south of the McCormick building. It's a beautiful building, works very, very well, and it's pretty exciting. We built the new soccer and lacrosse fields, which you saw up in the northeast side of the campus. We built a new central utility plant right along the plan. Now this is Silverman Hall. If you want to place it, our the Kellogg Allen Center is right over here. This is the School of Education. Right behind these buildings is the Ryan Nanotechnology. So what happened here is we were connecting the chemistry buildings basically to the nanotechnology buildings and basically to the engineering buildings. And this interaction, which is being done, by the way, many other universities, was very important as these scientists all want to start working together and be integrated in terms of their developing ideas and working together. We improved and expanded the Cyrill Hall Health Center. Many of you remember the older building. It's in the same location, just grown and expanded in 2010. Then our dean in the engineering school decided to start filling in all this empty space he had in these notches up at the Technology Institute. 2012 we did that, in 2013 we did that. And then we bought the institution, what was the name of it? Seabury, across the street, and we're renovating that for additional university halls and dorms and other useful uses for the campus. Now this is the north parking garage. It's not a very good photograph. This is looking at it from the south. The Crown Center is this building that's right here. We connected the whole thing, made a much bigger exercise area, much more equipment. On these lower floors will be the speech and education areas. And then up in here on the second level, this is the first level, this is the second level, is going to be the 1871 innovation area. And this is the South Campus, which is really, remember, everything I've been showing you just about has been on North Campus. Everything is engineering, everything is science, chemistry, whatever. I mean, I often joke that if we really had this on a teeter-totter, the whole north of the campus would be down and we'd be up in the air on the south end of the campus. But now we're spending a lot of effort expanding and beautifying the south area. So if you remember, this was the parking garage you saw, which was going all the way over here. And we lopped it off. It was a joint and tension system, so we had to cut it at certain places. And we cut it here and are creating an art screen that'll come down right to the beach, which we think will be very beautiful. This building is done by the Getch Associates in Chicago, wonderful architectural firm. In here is going to be the nicest recital hall in the city of Chicago. It was named for Mary Galvin. You'll see a picture in a minute. It's quite beautiful. And here's Pick Steiger. Here's the Block Museum of Art. Here's the Norris Student Union. Here's the new addition to the library. And here, of course, is the older buildings in journalism. And this is the South Garage, which isn't a very good picture, sort of shrunk. And then on this lower level is the Visitor Center. And then up on this second level is a very nice conference room and work areas for the young people who give the tours. So all the tours at a campus now, instead of starting several blocks away, we'll start here and be able to wander through our arch of the university through the whole campus. So it ended up to be a wonderful place. Besides that, students and their parents can come and just park in our garage. So there's plenty of parking in the garage for students and parents to come and join us in the new visitor center. We're very proud of that piece of work. This is what it looks like as you drive in from off of Sheridan Road from the south. And this doesn't look like a parking lot. I mean, one of the things we wanted to do, when we announced there was going to be a parking lot, the city of Evanston got all up in uproar. We said, it's not going to look like a parking lot. It's going to be a beautiful building. And this was done by Perkins and Will. And the trick of what we've done in buildings now, we did a lot of buildings where we didn't hire. Years ago, they hired great architects like Walter Netsch and his period. But then we went through a series of architects who were just okay architects. And the trick is not what we do, but hiring the right architect to do beautiful buildings and then direct them in the way you want to, show them what's going on. So here's the visitor center here. It's easy to visit. You can drive in a parking lot and take an elevator down. It's got a beautiful deck out here, and it's for the summertime, looking out over the sandy beach, the sailboats in the summer, and out on the lake, and actually a side view to the city. And in fact, one of our presentation halls about the university is right here. We pull curtains back, and everybody's looking out at the lake. It's spectacular. I just visited it tonight because I was complaining that the colors of these columns weren't right. They were supposed to be a light gray, and they ended up a light brown. The problem with it is it's against a dark blue granite gray background, and that wasn't supposed to be. Only mistake we made. The north columns, the columns in the north part of the garage, they're gray, but these ended up brown. Very hard to change these columns. This is looking at it from the beach side. So here's our new sailing center. right here. It's really beautiful, very neat, beautiful job. I think Hullabard and Root did it. The sailing boats, if you've never seen that, we got a great fleet of about 30, 40 boats kids can take out if they join the sailing club and learn how to sail and take it out. And here's this parking garage. The parking garage you don't see from here, but if you're out at the music building area or at the end of that south garage and you turn west, what Perkins and Will did, Ralph Johnson, is he built a series of sails. The whole wall, this whole wall, that's the garage, and these vertical elements are like nylon sails, and so they have a slight quivering to them. It's really remarkable. I'd never seen that before in another building, and you could see it also from the north side of the building. This is the Music and Communication Building. I told Morton when we started this he should put his offices up here, but he decided not to. But it's the most beautiful site it's in the whole campus. Meanwhile, our deans are up here, both up here and up here, as you can imagine. But we will be able to hire the most remarkable musicians from now on to teach in our university. And this was really an important building. One, because our music building school is in probably the oldest building in the campus. And it's, I don't know, 100-year-old relic. And to bring this up to date, we really had to build something quite remarkable. Again, this was done by Getch and Associates. Here's the western side of it. This is the recital hall. Here are the classes in here. Administration is up in here. There's wonderful rooms down here for entertaining and having events that will also have a beautiful glass rail, and you'll be able to stand out here in nice weather and have events that are happening within it. The hallway itself is one of the best things I've ever seen Jim Getch do. Beautiful, tall, elegant with a glass. This is a whole glass ceiling that will connect these two parts of the building. And it was beautifully done. And this is the inside of the hall I was telling you about. And what you're looking out here, this is looking back towards the cameras in the hall, but now here you're looking out at double pane glass windows, very acoustically tested. And out there, if you look straight out, sitting there, you'll see the skyscrapers of Chicago. So you'll see the lake, you'll see the cities of Chicago. And in here, Getch did a wood. He used a canabra wood or some rare African wood. And we did very, very thin layers of the wood, and we laminated it on. And he weaves it in and out. And it's really quite beautiful. And so when you walk into this hall and you see the ceiling and the walls and the way they wind in and out, it's a remarkable environment. Even if you don't want to listen to music, you want to be in there. It's just a wonderful feeling. And so here's where the recitals will take place. Here's the audience seating. It seats about 400 people, and it's a beautiful, beautiful place. And it was named after Mary Galvin by her family. And Mary, as you know, is a generous donor to all the arts in the city and one of the great collectors of violins. She has several Stradivarius in her collection. She's really was the most proper place to do it. And then I'll show you the projects now we're considering in construction. I told you about the tech infills. We keep adding infills. I think there's 3 under construction now. This is the new Kellogg building. Way back, I think in the plans I showed you there, this is going to go just next to the Allen Center. This is a $300 million project. It will make and bring Kellogg's business school up to the state of the art. What we found, even though our current Anderson Hall over here is probably 20, 25 years old, today in the war we're running, we're always competing with all the other great business schools, whether it's Harvard or Yale or Wharton or Michigan and Stanford. And when we surveyed our students as they were exiting, the big issue they felt was that this building wasn't up or as exciting as the other business schools around the country today. So we're in this war of trying to attract the best and the brightest, and we felt we had to come up with a great design, and this is just beautiful. It has a magnificent entrance hall, great views of the lake looking east, great views of downtown looking south, actually great views looking north over the lake. And it's quite a nice school building, considering what we went to. And this is the view from the northwest. And the economics department will occupy, let me go back. The economics department will occupy, I believe, the top floor. Is that right, Dan? one of the wings of the top floor. So this will be done end of next year. So this is the slide I wanted. So here's where you see the Kellogg building, and here's the Allen Center, and someday we'll connect the two. And this is the new parking garage that we've attached to the Crown Athletic Center. As you can see, this is the plan. And right now, we're also trying to raise funds for building a baseball stadium down on Central Street, just to the north side of Dyke, or Ryan Field. It'll be built there. So constant improvement going on. Obviously, this picture is before we finished the music building. This picture is before we chopped off the parking lot. It shows some construction going on here. It's probably done a couple of years ago. But since this picture was taken, we've now got the new parking deck, the new sailing school, the new art screen coming up here, and the new building, which you can see is the new music building over there. On the north end of the campus, we had a bunch of fraternity houses on Lincoln. Those were all torn down, and we're going to build a very large men's dormitory over at that end of the university. And then, of course, we're talking about improving Norris, which is here, improving the library, which needs always updating and improvements, and that's real important for the university. This is the old Kellogg building here, and this building will be converted by the university for liberal arts and for humanities and other areas of the university's needs. So in the meantime, we're redesigning Kresge, air conditioning it, updating it, modernizing it. It's probably one of the, as you saw, one of the older buildings on campus. So we're completely redoing that. Where I told you about Rocky Miller Park over the new baseball stadium. We're redoing and looking at how we can redo and modernize the Norris University Center for students. I just told you about the new residence halls on Lincoln. And like I just told you, we're going to take the Jacobs and Anderson halls and infill them with other areas of the university. And the Wirtz Center is going to go under renovation, and so is Lutkin Hall. So we've got a lot of under design. This is all about Evanston, but downtown, as you may know, we're also planning a very major new medical research building that Perkins & Will is also doing. I don't have the slide of that here, but it's a spectacular new building that'll go just to the west of our current Lurie Research Building, where we took down the old Prentice Hospital. And that itself was a big fight for us, but we're going to be building a wonderful, wonderful new research building. It'll be originally 12 stories high, with the ability to be adding another 24 stories in terms of its design. So we've had a lot of architectural meetings. We work very diligently 3 or 4 times a year. This committee meets, and we spend a lot of time talking about what the architecture should be, what we like, what the materials should be, how we should build it, the size of it. And we stand between the administration and the faculty, the deans, and the Board of Trustees. But I just wanted to take you through what we've been working on. And if you can just imagine this, if you go back and think about that lake front when we were all, a lot of us were here in 1956 to 60, and you think of the campus today, we've probably quadrupled the amount of space at this university. And we just had to do that to be competitive, draw the best scientists to our labs and research areas, the best nanotechnology teams we could find. And in a sense, all of this is necessary in a highly competitive world we're in. So I want to thank you, and any questions, I'll be happy to take it after dinner.
Thank you, Gordon, so much. That wasn't a terrific overview of the development of the campus? That's just amazing. And now we'll hear from Eugene Sunshine, who tells us the nitty-gritty of how these projects get done. Gene.
Thank you. Now I know why they invited me. This is a complete setup. They're going to have the recently retired CFO tell you how we paid for all of this stuff and how we're going to pay for the buildings that Gordon has shown as coming down the pipeline. Well, I'm not going to do that. I think all of you have probably drawn the conclusion that I drew for myself many years ago when I started working here, and that is we have a hell of an edifice complex at this place. And I'm going to talk more about this edifice complex a little bit later. But it is, I live with this stuff for many, many years. And I sit here and listen to it and watch it, and I'm amazed by all of what we've accomplished. And I will say that we funded quite responsibly and legitimately over many years through multiple sources. So I'll talk a little bit more about these buildings and their value to us well beyond the architecture and the design and so forth, which we're very, very proud of, particularly in recent years, but the value of those buildings beyond that. Now, I've participated in a lot of things in my career here where I was reasonably successful, thanks to a lot of people, some of whom are in the room. But one thing I have failed at, and it's really obvious tonight, it's not a darn lagoon. It's a cooling pond. If you go by it and you look at the cooling pond, am I right, David Bishop? You're smiling. You've heard me say this before. It doesn't work. No, but no one listens to me. If you go by there and get close, you see all kinds of electrical equipment and all kinds of other things underneath, which is why we've never allowed the students to take rowboats out in there, which is what they've wanted to do. It's very much part of the cooling plant, saves us a lot of energy in cooling and so forth. Now, we designed it nicely, and it looks pretty nice with the plants and so forth around it, but it's not a lagoon. The lagoon just sounds to me too romantic, too nice, and I view it as a cooling pond for which we've had a permit for many years from the State Department of Environmental folks to use it for that purpose. So I'm getting a few things off my chest here tonight. Now, it is true that, as was pointed out, that it was 50 years ago that Adlai Stevenson stood up there and declared victory, so to speak, that the lakefront the lake field was completed. But I'm here to tell you it was many years thereafter before it was anything other than sand. Okay, so my years, Holly's years here, 67 to 71. In the early part of that, 67, 68, there was essentially nothing out there but a lot of sand. We had half of Indiana that had been carted up to fill, and while I like Indiana and so forth and was pleased that we were able to take a lot of their sand off their hands at very cheap cost, the fact is that there wasn't really that much that were on that campus at all. So I have a very vivid memory of those years, okay, which was playing intramural football out on the lakefront, out on the sand. It was kind of a cross between playing in the Sahara Desert with all the sand, but yet freezing our butts off because of the wind coming in the fall. Okay? Now, for folks like me who like to try to catch passes and even throw a few back in those days, I'm talking about footballs now, back in those days, it was a very interesting time, and it was a great, the fact that we had all the wind and we were playing on sand actually was very beneficial to me. Because whenever I screwed up, dropped a pass, or threw an errant pass, I could always rely on the fact that it was the wind or the sand. So I haven't admitted that to too many folks, but I suspect my teammates during that period of time knew that I was using it as an excuse. So it took quite a while for the place to develop into something at all. Now, one of the things that was developed early on, which I remember vividly because it happened about 2 years after I graduated, was the Norris Center. Now, the Norris Center, which, as Gordon pointed out, all these years later, we're now about to redo, build around it and so forth. The Norris Center was effectively our first official, I guess one might say, student union. But in some respects, it wasn't the first place that was looked to on campus prior to that to function as a student union. And that was the grill in Scott Hall. Now, how many of you remember the grill? Rich is laughing here. Oh, quite a few, good. Okay, so any similarity, there was absolutely no similarity between the grill and being a student gathering place. I mean, to call it that, it was the equivalent of saying that ugly garage that Gordon pointed to on the southeast end of campus, the two-story thing, was an architectural marvel. I mean, it just was a complete exaggeration and completely untrue. Now, the grill was in the basement of Scott Hall. This was our student union for a lot of us. And it was dark and hazy in there and smoky. Now, sure, there was cigarette smoking going on there too, but I'm here to tell you there was a hell of a lot more things being smoked in that period of time. This was the late 60s, That was, I mean, it didn't really matter what the place looked like because you couldn't really see through the haze and you couldn't see, you know, through the dark lights and so forth. So that was our student union. A year or two after Holly and I graduated, and others in the 70, 71 period of time graduated, along came the Norris Center, which for so many years has served us so well as a central point for student activities, among other places, and for other things as well. Now, I'm cutting through some of this stuff in the interest of time. The new library, of course, opened in 1970. That was when we were juniors, so I participated in that too. And I still refer to it as the new library. Okay, there's Deering and there's the new library. Okay? And when I talk to students, before I retired, since I've retired, and I refer to the new library, they sort of look at each other, and you know what's on their mind, which is, what the hell is he talking about, the new library? And then, of course, they know the aggressiveness of Sarah in trying to get a whole lot of improvements made, and they wonder whether one was built last weekend and they just don't know about it. So the new library is still the new library for me, although my fondest memories of being in a library were really not in the new library, but were really in Deering, studying in that major room on the second floor, and occasionally taking a break and seeing what was going on at the concession machines there and so forth, which was kind of the secondary to the Grill student union. I want to talk a little bit about this edifice complex. Obviously, I'm saying that just to be cute and to try to just get you focused on it in a little bit. All of these buildings many of them are beautifully designed, particularly the ones in the last couple of decades. And we take a lot of pride in that. We've won a lot of architectural awards. We've won a lot of awards for historic preservation in Harris and in other places as well. So I don't want to in any way not pay full service to that. But these buildings house people. These buildings house programs. And when you think about, as Gordon was going through all of those buildings, there are buildings there relating to student activities, to student recreation space, to sciences, to music, to theater. Those are just examples of the kinds of research, buildings relating to academic enhancements, all kinds of things that have gone on. Where would Northwestern be without those buildings and without the Lakeville campus? We were landlocked. Actually, one might argue we're starting to get very landlocked again, but we sure as heck were landlocked before that was undertaken. Now we've grown into it a little bit, but where would we be without it? Those buildings have allowed us to soar in terms of our reputation and quality in all of the fronts that you might consider: the research, the teaching, the academic side, as I said, the music, theater, and on and on and on. And I think what we mustn't lose sight of is not only that the Lakeville enabled us to add space, and add a lot of space, and add some really beautiful buildings, and get rid of, in the case of that one garage, some of the turkeys. It's not only for that, but it has been vitally important to not only maintaining Northwestern's excellence, but growing Northwestern's excellence. And I like to think a lot of that growth is on the shoulders of all of you in the room and me. You know, because we went to school here many years ago when it was a great place. It's even a greater place now, and the Lakeville is probably the most important thing that allowed that to happen, for the space it provided for us and for what went on in the space. And that's the most important message from my perspective that I want to share with you. Finally, I want to say something about Gordon Siegel. Gordon became the chairman of the facilities committee, a few years before I got here. I've had the pleasure over my 17 years of working with him and his committee, but I want to talk specifically about Gordon. You can tell from listening to him, from the way things come out of his mouth, from the knowledge that he has, how passionate he is about Northwestern. That's how I would describe Gordon Siegel, as passionate. And he combines that with a sense of realism, with a sense of practicality, with a sense of vision and so forth, and you have what has been and will continue to be the most spectacular person you could have in this position. All of these buildings he has had in one way or another, usually more than less, his fingers in. And I mean that in the most positive sense of the word. So I don't oftentimes get a chance. It's easier for me to say this now that I'm retired than when I was working for him. Some might say that was a little bit self-serving under those circumstances, so it's easier for me to say it now. So I wanted to have the chance to say that about you, Gordon. And very quickly, the other person I wanted to single out was not able to be here tonight for family reasons, and that's Ron Naylor, who Gordon referred to. Ron is our vice president for capital facilities, retiring at the end of this calendar year, so the end of December. And there are a bunch of his staff who are here tonight. That group, working with Gordon, working with myself, working with the presidents, working with Provost Linzer, and before him, Provost Duma, was responsible for the selection of architects, the management of the architects, and so forth, working with our clients. Who are the clients? The clients are the faculty, the clients are the deans, the individuals for whom really in large measure, these buildings are built. Amazing amount of stuff done, amazing quality, amazing staff, and I wanted to say that about Ron Naylor, even though he's not here. A lot of people in the room know him. So I am deeply indebted to his performance as a colleague and friend, and I know Gordon is too. So with that, I'm done.
Well, we have, I wanted to ask a couple questions and then have you all stay and chat and be able to ask our panelists more questions. But this is really for either Gordon or Gene or both of you together. It's really extraordinary, the development of the campus over the last 2 decades in particular, as you mentioned. Do you have a favorite building that you worked on that you could really, it was complex in a particular way, or brought people together in a particular way, or brought the city of Evanston on your side?
Well, let's not push
ways?
Can I start with that? Gordon, you think about it? For me, it's Harris Hall, the renovation of Harris Hall. How many of you had classes in Harris Hall? Yeah. Well, freshman year, fall quarter, I was in Harris 107, taking one of those American politics courses. Many of you probably similarly. In many respects, Harris to me is the heart of arts and sciences because of the history, the political science. It's not the home of the English department, but there are a lot of English classes in there. And so forth. Wonderful building, one of the original, if you saw in Gordon's map, or Kevin's map, one of the original places in desperate need of upgrading and indeed a little bit of expansion. But a very historical building, both officially and unofficially, right? And that was done, that renovation and expansion was done with such sensitivity that what you have now is a place that is truly phenomenal. It sits on the most historical portion of the campus. So we wanted, for so many reasons, to be very careful about it. Not only is it pretty, not only did we restore the historical nature of it and in a very good manner add to it, but it works, the building. It works. It works for the students, it works for the grad students, it works for the faculty members, and so forth who were there. I feel really good about that now. The other thing I feel is a corollary to that is that a bunch of us participated in purchasing 1800 Sherman, which is a private building that is now owned by the university. I think Gordon had it on his map. One of the reasons why we bought that was swing space. So that when we undertook the renovations, that was one of them. Then there was Annie Swift, there's Kresge Centennial. We had room to relocate the faculty out of their offices to another place near campus or on campus so that we can do the renovation. Right? That was the first building for which we used 1800 as swing space for Harris. So it all worked to take care of the faculty during construction, or a lot of them, but more importantly for the product that we ended up with. And I could give you 2 or 3 others, but I'm not gonna. I'll let Gordon do that. But Harris Hall is my favorite.
How about you, Gordon? Do you have a favorite building you've worked on?
Asking about what's your favorite building is like asking who's your favorite child. And I think you tend to love them all if you work on them and put a lot of effort into them, as you know, with children. But he stole what I thought was a most sensitive change. But I think if we look at it today, the impact will be on our school of music school and the School of Communication building. That's going to be a remarkable building. It is a remarkable building. It will be published all over the country. I think that's remarkable. But I am probably most amazed at what Ralph Johnson did with the garage on the South Garage building. That's really, I never thought I'd praise a garage, but this garage is unbelievable. And it's really remarkable how they did it and how they fit it together. And there were a few mistakes, but it is remarkable. And Blair Kamen, who's one of the architectural critics here in the Tribune in Chicago, he even mentioned it, even though it was just open and not really previewed. I'm going to walk them through it, I hope, and have them really see what it does. It's really a wonderful space. And sometimes the most utilitarian simple things can be very beautiful. And they did a great job in that building. You will see it every time you drive in to the arts end of the campus now. And I know I was somewhat terrified about what it was going to look like as it was going up, because so many of my friends in Evanston complained to me about why'd we take out the trees that were there and why you're building a building so big there. And I was trying to explain to them we've got to put more parking into the campus and get rid of this old double deck that we had eventually. And that building, by the way, is designed so we could double it someday when we need another building and tear out the rest of that double-decked concrete garage that's on the south end, which is a great building site also.
It's definitely the most un-garage-like looking garage you will ever see. Several people in Evanston have said to me, I thought you were building a garage there. What was the fight over?
Well, I can testify to that because my husband and I were driving through the campus last weekend, and I said, and that's the new garage, and he said, that's not a garage. No, that's not a garage. I said, look, it's a garage. Not only that, but it's in such a great location to be able to overlook the city of Chicago. You know, that view from the parking garage and from the School of Music it's phenomenal. I mean, what other university can do that? And the music school almost looks like a ship, you know, a prow facing the water. It's really, really extraordinary. Yeah. I had one question for you, Kevin, too. When you talked about the lake fill and how it happened and how Otto Kern was able to get things through the legislature so easily, was there any controversy at all about filling in the lake at the time?
Absolutely. Although at the time, there wasn't as much controversy as a project like that would engender right now. So this is prior to the Environmental Protection Agency, prior to much of the environmental movement going on. Northwestern pretty easily, through the good work of Mr. Carr and his associates, pushed the idea through the Illinois House, the Illinois Senate, through the governor, through the city of Evanston, and then through the Army Corps of Engineers. Army Corps of Engineers was most concerned with how the lake fill would affect boating, navigation on the lake. The big problem came when people realized that the sand used for the fill was coming from northern Indiana. And there was a misapprehension that the sand was coming from the Indiana dunes. So it was not. It was coming from the creation and expansion of Burnham Harbor down by the steel mills. But the notion that Northwestern might be taking sand away from the dunes or the dunes area that would impact that beautiful area caused a hue and cry for a time. But that was pretty much put to bed. Influence makers, Chicago Sun-Times came out on Northwestern side, pointed out the facts of the case that this was not coming from the dunes. But there was some pressure at the time, some controversy over that, and helped to kickstart environmental concerns in organizations, particularly in the lake area, lake region.
Which is why we'd never be able to do it today, probably. I'm getting the sign that I think we have to wrap up this fascinating evening tonight. Please stay and chat with our panelists, and I'd now like to bring up our closing speaker for the evening.
Thank you. My favorite building was Deering Library because that's where I met most of my dates, but in the reading room there. But I'm Dan Jones. I'm a trustee. I'm also proud to be a member of the Library Board of Governors, and I'm also just retired as the president of your Northwestern Alumni Association. So, and the Library Board of Governors and I would like to thank you for being with us this evening. We'd like to thank our speakers. This is the third year that the library has kicked off the homecoming and reunion weekend, and I see a lot of familiar faces, some past meetings that we've had in the past. I'm also a co-chair, along with my wife Susan and Steve Strawn, for the capital campaign for the library. And Susan, my wife, and I support Northwestern in many ways, but the library is a very special place for us. As I mentioned, the Deering was my favorite building, but also I think you all would agree that libraries are critical to the success of a university. And we do a very good job here under Sarah and her team, and we want to continue that. The library also has capital needs, and as I think most of you understand, we have a capital campaign underway right now, the We Will campaign. And the library has its need as part of that. If you would like to add your support to the library, there is a nice little blue card on your seat, and on it is the name of the contact, Carlos Terrazas, who is the development director for the library. And please contact Carlos, and he will see to it that we can help you with your support. Now, as a token of our support, of our appreciation for the speakers this evening, we have a photo of the life-saving station that I believe Kevin mentioned. And Gordon, thank you very much for your speaking here. And I think you all can understand why we're so fortunate to have Gordon leading our properties committee. And Gene, another terrific alum. In fact, you're all three alums. And Gene is one of the reasons that Northwestern is on strong fiscal standing. We have a great university, and Gene has done a lot to make it that way, and we appreciate everything you've done for us. And Kevin, the best university archivist in the United States. Thank you.